The warning lights flashed red across the command center of the Galactic Council station. Admiral Zexhai of the Kronak Empire rushed from his quarters as alarms filled the corridors. His 6 eyes focused on the massive display screens that covered the central wall. Numbers and symbols moved across the screens faster than most beings could read them. "What is happening?" he demanded as he entered the control room. The officer at the main console turned toward him with fear clear in her voice. "Sir, we are reading massive energy signatures from the Sol system," she reported. "The readings match no known technology in our databases." Zexhai felt his blood run cold. Sol system had been empty for 300 years. When the humans vanished without warning centuries ago, the entire galaxy had breathed easier. Those strange bipedal creatures had been unpredictable and dangerous. They developed faster than light travel in just decades, while most species took thousands of years to reach that level. "Are you certain? These readings are from Sol," he asked. "Yes, sir, confirmed. By 3 separate scanning stations," the officer replied. "Whatever is out there is big and it is moving this way." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. The ethereal collective's floating cities detected the same energy patterns. The guardian worlds felt tremors in space itself. Even the ancient watchers who rarely spoke to other species sent urgent messages to the Galactic Council. Counselor Veltara floated in her tank of blue liquid as reports came in from every corner of known space. Her tentacles moved in patterns that showed deep concern. As the current leader of the Galactic Council, she had to make decisions that could affect billions of lives. "Send long-range probes toward Sol system," she ordered. "We need to know what we are dealing with." The probes launched within hours, but they would take weeks to reach their destination. In the meantime, panic began to spread through the civilized worlds. News networks across the galaxy started broadcasting warnings about possible threats from the old human territories. 300 years ago, when humanity disappeared, the major powers had divided their space among themselves. The Kronak took the mining world's rich and rare metals. The ethereal collective claimed the research stations where humans had been working on advanced technologies. The Guardians absorbed the agricultural planets where humans had grown food for their expanding population. Everyone had benefited from the humans leaving. Their space was valuable, and their absence meant one less unpredictable element in galactic politics. Now something was coming back from that empty region of space. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship as it moved through the darkness between stars. The ESS Defiance was unlike any vessel that had existed when humanity first reached for the stars. Its hull seemed to shift and flow like living metal. Energy patterns moved across its surface in ways that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. "Captain, we are receiving multiple hails from alien vessels," reported Lieutenant Kelly Brooks from her station. "They are demanding we identify ourselves and state our intentions." Jake smiled as he looked at the display showing dozens of alien ships moving to intercept them. These beings had no idea what humanity had become during their long absence. While the galaxy had remained the same for 3 centuries, Earth had experienced something very different. "Open a channel to all frequencies, Kelly," Jake ordered. "Let them hear what we have to say." The message that went out across space was simple and direct. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthstar Navy. We are coming home." The reaction was immediate. Alien commanders who had been demanding answers suddenly found themselves speechless. The humans were supposed to be gone forever. Their return changed everything. On Earth itself, massive cities stretched across continents in ways that seemed to blend technology with nature. Trees grew alongside buildings that reached into the clouds. Rivers flowed through urban centers where millions of humans lived and worked. The planet looked nothing like it had when humanity first left their homeworld centuries ago. Fleet Admiral Lisa Parker stood in the command center deep beneath the surface of North America. Around her, dozens of officers coordinated the movements of hundreds of ships throughout human space. The time had come to reclaim what had always belonged to them. "Status report," she requested from her staff. "All fleets are in position, Admiral," reported Commander Ryan Scott. "We have visual confirmation of alien occupation in 17 former human systems." "Any hostile actions from the occupying forces?" she asked. "Negative, Admiral. Most are pulling back to defensive positions. They seem confused about our capabilities," Lisa nodded. The aliens had every reason to be confused. Humanity had spent 300 years in isolation developing technologies that would seem like magic to other species. They had learned to manipulate matter at the molecular level. Their ships could adapt to any threat in real time. Their soldiers were enhanced far beyond anything that had existed before. But the most important change was not in their technology. Humanity had evolved beyond the need for conquest or domination. They sought only to reclaim what was theirs and to explore what lay beyond the known galaxy. The first human ship to enter former human territory appeared at the edge of the Kepler system. The research station that had once been humanity's pride was now controlled by the Ethereal Collective. 47 alien ships moved to intercept the single human vessel. Admiral HFY watched the tactical display as the confrontation began. The human ship was outnumbered and should have been destroyed within minutes. Instead, something impossible happened. The alien weapons seemed to have no effect. Energy beams that should have cut through any hull were absorbed and redirected. Missiles that should have caused massive explosions simply passed through sections of the human ship that became temporarily transparent. "How is this possible?" whispered his tactical officer. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. When it ended, all 47 alien ships had been disabled. Their crews were safely evacuated before their vessels were carefully dismantled by the human ship. Not a single life was lost, but the message was clear. Humanity had returned, and they were nothing like the species that had left 3 centuries ago. The galaxy would never be the same again. Every world that had once belonged to humans would be reclaimed. Every species would have to accept that the old order was ending. Captain Jake Morrison looked out at the stars ahead of his ship and smiled. They were going home at last. Behind them followed hundreds of vessels carrying millions of humans who had waited centuries for this moment. The galaxy had grown comfortable in their absence, but comfort could be dangerous. It was time for the universe to remember what humans could accomplish when they refused to accept limitations. The return of Earth had begun, and none were ready for what humanity had become. The news of humanity's return spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. On every civilized world, beings gathered around communication screens to watch footage of the impossible battle at Kepler Station. The human ship had moved through space like it was swimming through water instead of flying through vacuum. Weapons that should have destroyed it completely had no effect at all. Admiral HFY stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, trying to explain what his forces had witnessed. The massive chamber held representatives from over 200 species, and every one of them wanted answers he could not provide. The human vessel absorbed our energy weapons and redirected them back at us, he reported to the silent assembly. Their hull changed shape and density in real time. When we fired kinetic rounds, the metal became transparent and our shots passed right through empty space. Counselor Veltara floated in her tank watching the tactical recordings for the 20th time. Her tentacles moved in patterns that showed deep confusion and growing fear. "This technology should not be possible," she stated. "Matter cannot simply change its fundamental properties." "Yet that is exactly what we observed," HFY replied. The human ship was not just advanced. It was operating by completely different physical laws than anything we understand. On the other side of the galaxy, Fleet Admiral Lisa Parker coordinated the systematic reclamation of human space from her command center on Earth. Holographic displays showed the positions of hundreds of human ships as they moved toward their former territories. Each fleet had specific targets and clear instructions. "Report from Kepler Station," announced Commander Ryan Scott. "Station secured with 0 casualties. All ethereal personnel have been safely relocated to designated evacuation zones." "Excellent," Lisa replied. "What about their research data?" "We have copied everything to our databases before returning the original files to the ethereal government. They spent 3 centuries maintaining our facilities, so they deserve to keep any discoveries they made." This was perhaps the strangest aspect of humanity's return. They were not conquering or destroying anything. Every alien facility built on former human worlds was carefully documented and preserved. Every alien citizen was given safe passage to their own territory. The humans seemed more interested in restoration than revenge. Dr. Helen Carter materialized inside the main laboratory of Kepler Station without using any visible transportation method. The ethereal scientists who had been working there watched in amazement as she simply stepped out of what appeared to be empty air. Her arrival demonstrated yet another impossible human capability. "Please do not be alarmed," she said in perfect ethereal language. "I am here to ensure your research is safely transferred to your homeworlds." The lead ethereal scientist named Kethamol approached her carefully. "How did you just appear in our laboratory?" he asked. "Our sensors detected no transportation device." Helen smiled politely. "We have learned to move through dimensions that your instruments cannot detect. It is quite safe and much faster than traditional spacecraft dimensions," Kethamol repeated. "You mean theoretical space?" "Not theoretical anymore," Helen replied. "We discovered that what you call empty space is actually filled with layers of reality. With the right technology, you can step between them like walking through different rooms in a building." The implications of this casual statement made Kethamol's breathing apparatus work faster. If humans could move instantly between any points in space, then traditional military tactics were completely useless. No defense could stop an enemy that could appear anywhere without warning. Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison led his task force toward the former human colony of New Boston. The planet had been transformed into a massive industrial complex by the Kronak Empire. Millions of alien workers mined the rare metals that humans had discovered there centuries ago. "Kronak fleet moving to intercept," reported Lieutenant Kelly Brooks. 43 heavy cruisers and 2 battleships open a channel," Jake ordered. "Let me speak to their commander." The face that appeared on the communication screen belonged to General Tekvar of the Kronak military. His scaled features showed the aggressive nature that made his species such effective warriors. "Human vessel, you are entering Kronak territory without authorization," he growled. "Turn back immediately or face destruction." Jake remained calm as he replied. "General, this planet was settled by humans 400 years ago. We are simply coming home." "Your species has been gone for 3 centuries, Tekvar snapped. "Your claims have no legal standing under current galactic law." "I understand your position, General, but our absence does not void our original rights to this world. We are willing to discuss compensation for improvements you have made during our absence." Tekvar laughed harshly. "You think you can bargain with us, human? You have 1 ship against my entire fleet." "Actually, General, we have 12 ships," Jake corrected. "The others are simply not visible to your sensors yet." As if summoned by his words, 11 more human vessels began to appear around the Kronak fleet. They seemed to fade into existence like ghosts becoming solid. Within seconds, the aliens found themselves completely surrounded by ships that had not been there moments before. "Impossible," Tekvar whispered. "Where did they come from?" "We have been here the entire time," Jake explained. "We simply chose not to be seen until now." The brief battle that followed would be studied by military academies across the galaxy for generations. The Kronak fleet fired everything they had at the human ships. Energy cannons that could crack planets had no visible effect. Nuclear missiles that could destroy moons were absorbed harmlessly. The human vessels moved through the attack like it was a gentle rain. Then they began to respond. But instead of destroying the Kronak ships, they did something far more unsettling. The alien vessels simply stopped working. Their engines shut down, their weapons went offline, and their life support systems switched to emergency power. Every Kronak ship was completely disabled without suffering any permanent damage. "What have you done to my fleet?" Tekvar demanded. "We have temporarily disrupted the molecular bonds in your critical systems," Jake replied. "Your ships are unharmed, but they will need extensive repairs before they can function again. Your crews are safe and will be transported to the nearest Kronak outpost." Within hours, news of the second impossible human victory reached every corner of the galaxy. The beings who had vanished 3 centuries ago had returned with technology that made them essentially unstoppable, yet they seemed to have no interest in conquest or domination. They simply wanted their old territories back. This created a problem that no galactic government knew how to solve. How do you negotiate with a species that can appear anywhere, do anything, and seems to operate by rules that make no scientific sense? The humans were not acting like conquerors, but they were clearly capable of conquering anyone they chose. The galaxy would have to learn to live with a new reality. Humanity was home and everything had changed forever. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council had been called for the 3rd time in as many weeks. Representatives from every major civilization sat in tense silence as they waited for the human delegation to arrive. Nobody knew what to expect from these beings who seemed to have become something beyond normal understanding. Counselor Veltara floated nervously in her tank as reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy. Every world that had once belonged to humanity was being reclaimed with the same impossible efficiency. The humans appeared without warning, disabled any resistance, and then began the careful process of restoration. They treated the alien occupants with respect but made it clear that they were taking back what had always been theirs. Still no word from the human government, reported Admiral Zexhai. They respond to our hails but refuse to negotiate through normal diplomatic channels. What do they want from us? Asked Ambassador Catherine of the Guardian Collective. They could have destroyed our fleets completely, but instead they just disable our ships and send our people home. Perhaps that is what makes them so dangerous, Beltara replied. An enemy who destroys everything is predictable. An enemy who shows mercy while demonstrating overwhelming power is something we have never faced before. At that moment, the air in the center of the chamber began to shimmer and twist. The assembled representatives watched in amazement as a section of empty space seemed to fold in on itself. Dr. Helen Carter stepped through what appeared to be a doorway that had not existed seconds before. Behind her came Ambassador Eric Stone and Captain Susan Lee. Greetings, honored representatives, Helen said as the impossible portal closed behind them. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter as beings tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The humans had not used any visible transportation device. They had simply opened a hole in reality itself and walked through it like entering a room. How did you do that? Demanded Admiral Zexhai. What kind of technology allows you to appear anywhere without warning? Eric Stone smiled politely as he approached the central speaking platform. With respect, Admiral, what you call technology, we have learned to think of as natural law. When you understand that space and time are not fixed barriers but flexible dimensions, you discover many interesting possibilities. That is impossible, declared Chief Scientist Yethka of the Ethereal Collective. The fundamental laws of physics do not allow matter to simply appear in new locations. Captain Susan Lee stepped forward and placed her hand on the conference table. The metal surface began to flow and reshape itself, forming a complex three-dimensional model of the galaxy. Stars and planets moved through the air above the table, showing real-time positions of every major fleet and station. The laws of physics as you understand them are incomplete, Susan explained. Matter and energy are not separate things. They are different expressions of information, and information can be rewritten. She gestured, and the holographic galaxy zoomed in to show the molecular structure of the table itself. Individual atoms became visible as tiny points of light connected by streams of energy. When you realize that everything is just patterns of information, you can learn to edit those patterns like changing words in a document. The implications of this casual demonstration sent waves of fear through the assembled representatives. If humans could manipulate matter at the atomic level, then no defense was possible. They could turn weapons into flowers or transform entire fleets into harmless gases. What do you want from us? Beltara asked directly. You have the power to conquer the entire galaxy, so why are you talking instead of taking what you desire? Helen laughed softly. Conquest is such a primitive concept, Counselor. We have moved beyond the need to dominate others. We seek growth, exploration, and cooperation, not control. Then why are you taking back your former territories by force? Admiral Zexhai challenged. We are not taking anything by force, Eric replied. We are reclaiming what was always ours. Every world, every station, every mining operation in human space was built by humans with human resources. Your civilizations have been maintaining our property for 3 centuries, and we are grateful for that service. Service, Catherine repeated. We thought your species was extinct. We were never extinct, Susan said. We simply chose to step outside normal space-time while we underwent necessary changes. From your perspective, 300 years have passed. From our perspective, we have experienced over 30,000 years of continuous development. The number hit the assembled beings like a physical blow. 30,000 years of advancement while the rest of the galaxy remained essentially unchanged. No wonder human technology seemed impossible. They had been evolving while everyone else stayed the same. What changes? Beltara asked. What did you become during those 30,000 years? Helen gestured, and the air filled with images of Earth as it existed now. Cities that seemed to grow like living organisms, forests that hummed with technological integration, oceans filled with structures that defied traditional understanding of engineering. The planet itself seemed alive in ways that no world should be possible. We learned to integrate our consciousness with our technology, Helen explained. We discovered that the barrier between mind and matter is artificial. When you remove that barrier, amazing things become possible. You mean you have become cyborgs? Yethka asked. Not cyborgs, Susan corrected. Something much more fundamental. We have learned to exist as information patterns that can express themselves through matter energy or pure thought as needed. This revelation explains so much about human capabilities. If they existed as information, then they could copy themselves across space instantaneously. They could manipulate matter because they were not truly separate from it. They could appear anywhere because distance was meaningless to beings made of organized data. Why are you telling us this? Admiral HFY asked. Such knowledge could be considered a military secret, because we want you to understand that we are not your enemies, Eric replied. The galaxy has become stagnant during our absence. You have divided up the known space among yourselves and stopped exploring. You have accepted limitations that do not actually exist. What do you propose? Beltara asked. Helen smiled, and the holographic galaxy above the table expanded to show regions beyond current exploration. Vast areas of space filled with unknown stars and possible civilizations. We propose that you join us in discovering what lies beyond your current borders. The universe is much larger and more wonderful than any of us realize. And if we refuse, Catherine asked. Then you refuse, Susan replied simply. We will not force anyone to explore or grow. But we will also not allow the galaxy to prevent others from doing so. The age of artificial limitations is ending whether you participate or not. The human delegation prepared to leave through another impossible portal. They had delivered their message and offered their terms. Now the galaxy would have to decide how to respond to the return of humanity and the end of the old order that had dominated space for millennia. The weeks following the human delegation's appearance at the Galactic Council brought changes that nobody could have predicted. Across the galaxy, alien governments struggled to understand what the return of humanity meant for their civilizations. Some species called for immediate military action, while others urged caution and cooperation. Ambassador Eric Stone materialized in the diplomatic quarter of Nexus Prime, where representatives from dozens of worlds maintained their embassies. The sight of a human walking freely through the corridors that had been built after his species disappeared created quite a stir among the alien diplomats. Ambassador Stone, called out a familiar voice. Ambassador Catherine of the Guardian Collective approached him with obvious nervousness. I was hoping we could speak privately about the current situation. Eric nodded politely. Of course, Ambassador. Perhaps we could use the old human embassy building. I believe it has been maintained as a historical site. They walked together through streets filled with beings from across the galaxy. Many stopped to stare at Eric as if he were some kind of mythical creature that had stepped out of legend. The human embassy building stood exactly as it had been left 3 centuries ago. The Guardian government had preserved it perfectly as a monument to the vanished species. Please help me understand, Catherine said once they were seated in the old conference room. Your people have the power to take whatever you want from us. You could conquer every world in the galaxy within days, yet you seem more interested in talking than fighting. Eric looked around the room that had once hosted diplomatic meetings between humanity and the early galactic community. Ancient furniture and faded artwork reminded him of how young his species had been when they first reached for the stars. Tell me, Ambassador, Eric said. What would you do if you discovered that you had been living in a small room your entire life, believing it was the whole universe? Then one day someone showed you that there were actually millions of other rooms connected by hallways you never knew existed. I suppose I would want to explore those other rooms, Catherine replied. Exactly, Eric said with a smile. That is what humanity discovered during our time away. The galaxy as you know it is just one small room in a much larger structure. We want to explore what lies beyond, not waste time fighting over the tiny space we already know. But surely you must be angry about what happened to your territories while you were gone, Catherine pressed. My people took several of your agricultural worlds. Your people maintained those worlds beautifully, Eric replied. The ecological reports we have reviewed show that you actually improved the soil quality and increased biodiversity. We should be thanking you, not punishing you. This conversation was happening in various forms across the galaxy as human representatives met with alien leaders. The consistent message was always the same. Humanity had returned not as conquerors but as neighbors who wanted to restore old friendships and build new ones. Dr. Helen Carter stood in what had been the primary research laboratory on Kepler Station. The ethereal scientists who had worked there for centuries watched nervously as she examined their equipment and reviewed their data files. They expected criticism or demands, but instead received something entirely unexpected. "This is remarkable work," Helen said as she studied their quantum resonance experiments. "You have made discoveries that we never considered during our original research here." Chief Researcher Velnek approached her cautiously. "You are not angry that we used your facilities for our own projects." "Why would we be angry?" Helen replied. "Science belongs to everyone. The knowledge you gained here will benefit all species, including humanity." She gestured, and the laboratory equipment began to change. Instruments that had taken the ethereals decades to build were enhanced and improved in moments. Processing power increased by orders of magnitude while energy consumption dropped to almost nothing. "How are you doing that?" Velnek asked in amazement. "We are simply helping the equipment become more efficient," Helen explained. "When you understand matter at the information level, making improvements becomes quite simple." The enhanced laboratory would allow the ethereal scientists to continue their research at speeds they had never imagined possible. This pattern repeated across human space as returning humans upgraded and improved everything the alien occupants had built. General Carl Hughes coordinated the restoration efforts from Earth's primary command center. The planet itself continued to amaze visitors who came to see what humanity had become. Cities that grew like forests, transportation systems that moved people through folded space, manufacturing facilities that created products by assembling atoms directly into desired patterns. Status report on the integration projects he requested from his staff. "All former human territories are now operating with hybrid technology," reported Colonel Janet Foster. "Alien infrastructure has been enhanced rather than replaced. Productivity is up by an average of 400% across all sectors. Any resistance from the previous occupants? Actually, sir, many are requesting to stay and continue their work under human administration. They say the technological upgrades make their research and development programs far more effective than anything they could achieve in their home territories." This was perhaps the most surprising development of all. Instead of fleeing human space, many aliens were asking to remain and work alongside the returning humans. The technological benefits were simply too valuable to abandon. Captain Susan Lee walked through the transformed New Boston colony, where humans and Kronak worked side by side in mining operations that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. The harsh industrial complex had been converted into something that looked more like a garden than a factory. "How are the Kronak workers adapting to the new systems?" she asked the facility manager. "Better than expected, Captain," replied Manager Tim Brown. "The molecular extraction process is so much cleaner and more efficient that they actually prefer it to their old methods. We are getting 10 times the mineral output with 1/10 the environmental impact." A group of Kronak workers approached them. Their leader was a veteran named Thekmol, who had spent decades mining in harsh conditions. "Captain Lee," he said in heavily accented human language, "my crew wishes to know if we can learn to operate the new extraction systems ourselves." "Of course," Susan replied. "We will provide full training for anyone who wants to learn." The sight of former enemies working together toward common goals was becoming normal across human space. The galaxy was discovering that cooperation produced far better results than competition or conflict. News of these developments reached every corner of civilized space. Reports of incredible technological advancement combined with stories of peaceful cooperation created a new perspective on what the human return actually meant. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity had not come back to reclaim an empire. They had returned to share knowledge and invite everyone to join them in exploring possibilities that none of them had ever imagined. 6 months had passed since humanity first announced their return to the galaxy. The initial fear and confusion had given way to something none of the alien civilizations had expected. Wonder and hope were spreading across worlds that had known only stagnation for centuries. President Martha Williams stood before the reformed Galactic Council in a chamber that no longer existed on any physical space station. The meeting was taking place in a shared virtual environment that allowed representatives from across the galaxy to participate without the limitations of distance or atmospheric requirements. "The transformation we have witnessed these past months proves what we have always believed," Martha said to the assembled beings. Every species has unlimited potential when artificial barriers are removed. The changes were visible everywhere. Diseases that had plagued entire civilizations for thousands of years were being cured in days using human medical technology. Environmental damage from centuries of industrial development was being reversed by machines that rebuilt ecosystems at the molecular level. Even the basic concepts of scarcity and resource limitation were becoming obsolete. Counselor Veltara floated in her virtual tank watching data streams that showed improvement statistics from across the galaxy. The numbers are almost impossible to believe, she reported. Agricultural output has increased by 800%. Energy production has become essentially unlimited. Even our oldest and most polluted worlds are becoming habitable again. These improvements come with a price, warned Admiral Zexhai. We are becoming dependent on human technology. What happens if they decide to withdraw their support? Martha smiled gently. Admiral, the technology we share becomes part of your civilizations permanently. We are not creating dependence, but rather removing the limitations that have held everyone back. The truth was that humanity had moved far beyond any need to control or manipulate other species. Their civilization had achieved what they called post-scarcity existence. Every human had access to unlimited resources, energy, and even time itself. The concept of taking things from others had become meaningless when you could create anything you needed, Admiral. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of a ship that existed, partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that most beings could not perceive. Around him stretched a fleet composed of vessels from dozens of different species, all working together on humanity's most ambitious project yet. Status. Report on the Galactic Rim expedition he requested from his mixed crew of humans and aliens. All exploration. Teams are reporting successful contact with previously unknown civilizations, announced Commander Ryan Scott. We have discovered 17 new species in the past month alone. The exploration of space beyond the known galaxy had become a joint effort involving every major civilization. Human technology made it possible to travel distances that would have taken centuries using traditional faster-than-light drives. Ships could now cross entire galactic regions in days or even hours. Any hostile encounters? Jake asked. Negative, sir, Ryan replied. Most of the new species we encounter are fascinated by our technology and eager to establish peaceful contact. This pattern had repeated itself dozens of times as the joint exploration fleets pushed into uncharted regions. The universe was filled with civilizations that had never imagined that faster-than-light travel was possible. The arrival of the Galactic Alliance ships brought them into a larger community of worlds they had never known existed. Dr. Helen Carter worked in her laboratory complex that now spanned multiple dimensions simultaneously. Around her, scientists from hundreds of different species collaborated on projects that would have been considered pure fantasy just months earlier. The barriers between different forms of intelligence were dissolving as rapidly as the barriers between matter and energy. The consciousness Bridge project is ready for testing, announced her research partner Dr. Yethka of the Ethereal Collective. We should be able to establish direct mental communication between any species regardless of their biological differences. Excellent, Helen replied. This will allow us to share knowledge and experiences in ways that simple language cannot achieve. The implications were staggering. Once different species could share thoughts directly, the concept of misunderstanding or conflict based on communication failures would become obsolete. Every being in the galaxy would have access to the knowledge and wisdom of every other being. Captain Susan Lee stood in the main plaza of New Geneva, a human colony that had become the unofficial capital of the new galactic civilization. Around her, beings from hundreds of worlds walked together through streets that seemed to grow and reshape themselves to accommodate the needs of different species. Children from dozens of different civilizations played together in parks where the very concept of environmental limitations had been eliminated. Kronak youngsters who breathed methane played alongside ethereal children who lived in liquid environments and human kids who needed oxygen-rich atmospheres. The technology made it all possible without anyone having to compromise their natural needs. It is hard to believe this is the same galaxy where we grew up, said Commander Tim Brown as he joined Susan at a viewing platform that overlooked the plaza. The physical galaxy is the same, Susan replied. What has changed is our understanding of what is possible. A group of young beings approached them representing nearly every species in the known galaxy. Their leader was a human girl named Katie, who had become friends with children from worlds whose names their parents could barely pronounce. "Captain Lee," Katie said excitedly, "our teacher says that next month we will get to visit the Andromeda Galaxy for our science project." "Is that really possible?" Susan smiled. "Not only is it possible, Katie, but you might discover new civilizations that no one has ever met before." The children ran off chattering in a mixture of languages that somehow made perfect sense to all of them. They were the first generation to grow up in a universe where the word impossible had no meaning. President Martha Williams received reports from across human space and beyond, showing the same pattern everywhere. Cooperation had replaced competition. Exploration had replaced conquest. Growth had replaced stagnation. The galaxy was becoming something greater than the sum of its parts. The stars themselves seemed brighter, as if responding to the presence of civilizations that refused to accept limitations. Ancient barriers between species were dissolving. Worlds that had been enemies for millennia were working together on projects that benefited everyone. Humanity had returned to the galaxy not as conquerors but as catalysts for transformation that reached into every corner of known space. The might they brought was not military power but the irresistible force of unlimited possibility. The universe would never be the same. Every species that encountered human technology and philosophy found themselves asking the same question that had driven humanity for millennia. Why accept limitations when you can transcend them instead? Earth had come home, and in doing so had brought the entire galaxy home to a future that none of them had dared to imagine. The age of artificial boundaries was ending, and the age of infinite potential had begun.